Hello all. Before we look at using this sled as a pattern router for mortise and tenons, I want to give you a quick look at some of the changes I've made. Bit of an ongoing project this one. As you can see, the wheel arrangement was giving me some flex issues, though some of the flex you can see is the way the machine is sat on the bench here. Nothing I really noticed when flattening, but enough to give me concern for the other uses I had in mind. I decided to go with a more typical CNC style arrangement with wheels running above and below the outer rails. I couldn't find anyone offering plate sets for this, so I bought a sheet of aluminium to fashion my own. I'm using an Irwin aluminium blade in the saw, really impressed with it. After squaring the sheet up, I mark out all the pieces I'll need for the rebuild, being careful to leave at least a curved width between each piece marked for cutting. With all my pieces cut, I mark and centre punch for all the drilled holes. A really cost effective way of putting together a custom alley profile machine this. So here is how the machine is laid out now. Triangular corner pieces supporting the rails and cross members. Two lengths of 2040 profile run the length of the machine as a base. And the 2060 rails are sat 40mm above the bench to allow for the new wheel arrangement. A quick shout out to Harry at Ooznest here, by the way, for going above and beyond to send me a dead straight rail piece to replace a bent one. Honestly mate, thank you for that. As you can see, my new plates hold 6 wheels, 3 above, 3 below. Much more sturdy and super smooth compared to the previous setup. The whole machine is much more well behaved now. So here we arrive at the point of this video. Mounted to a piece of 2060 profile are 2 machined aluminium plates I had made. The piece on the left has 6 raised oval shapes to help me form tenons. 2 at 6x18mm, 2 at 8x24mm and 2 at 12x36mm. The other plate on the right has the same but inverse to help form mortises. Being mounted on profile like this means I can move them back, front, left, right, mount them any way I like really, depending on what work I'm doing. At the front of the bed of the sled, I've mounted a profile piece set square or 90 degrees to hold work for tenons. I'm in the process of designing a mitre gauge for this to give me 180 degrees of movement to increase my options, but for now, straight up and down it is. There's a little adjustable stop there for setting the height too, meaning once routed, I can just flip a piece, no marking, and replicate the tenons on the other end, then do the next piece and so on. Everything is adjusted with little hex screws at the minute. I'd much rather these were thumb screws or small levers for ease of use, but all in good time. So on the back of the mounting plates for the Z axis, I've bolted on a piece of 4040 profile simply because it has a 6mm-ish hole through the middle. This holds a 6mm steel rod which I can lock with a knob, and as you can hopefully see, this pin is guided by the plates and copied by a 6mm router bit at the other side. So let's get on to a demo. I'm marking up a piece from a scrap box here with an 18x18 square. I'm using a nice thick pencil so it's nice and clear on camera. Not the best for accuracy, but will serve us for an example. I've also marked a line at 15mm from the end on each face for depth. Doesn't need to be all around, just a couple of marks on your first piece to set the plates and you're off. Assuming your material is dimensioned the same of course, which as it turned out, my scrap pieces weren't. Same deal for setting up the mortise plate too. A couple of marks for the edges, one for depth. So with one end of the first piece marked up, I can clamp it up to set the router and plate. Depth is obviously straightforward, cut her to the mark, then set the stop. Next, with the cutter aligned to the leftmost mark, I set the edge of the first tenon on the plate to match, then lock it down. Then I can move the pin to the back side of the first tenon guide and drag it until my cutter on the other side meets the rearmost line I marked. Then square and tighten, and once double checked with a quick once around, we're set to cut. have to tell you, it's a pretty satisfying way to cut tenons, this. Once one side is cut, just unclamp and flip the piece to cut the other side. No markings or adjustment necessary on uniform stock, of course. Here I set the camera up around the back so you can see what's going on. And there we have it, a couple of nice accurate tenons cut at either end of the piece. For the mortises, it's essentially the same operation. Clamp your workpiece up with one end of the first piece marked. Drop the guide pin into the slot and drag into position, so the router cutter meets your pencil marks. Then square and lock down. On the mortises, unlike the tenons, I have to move the pin from one slot to the other. Not a huge deal, and when you machine the other end, you can keep it in the same slot to start. Perhaps a spring-loaded pin is something I could work on in the future. We'll see. So the end result is a really nice fit, not too loose, not too tight, and machined such as they are, they connect dead square. I couldn't be happier with how this has worked out, to be honest. I can't wait to use it in anger on furniture, tables and chairs. This is the work I dimensioned the plates for. But what about bigger or more randomly shaped pieces? Well, I could have more plates made, which are far from cheap to have machined, let me tell you, or I could use the series of stops on the rails of the machine. I have these little thumb screws on each side, front, back and left and right of the machine to limit movement as need be. For example, I've marked out a little square on this piece of handrail from the scrap bin. Nice wood this, elm I think, not sure. Let me know below if you know. So tenon first again, I need to set a stop to limit my rightward movement to the left line marked on the piece. Then have at it and cut to the set depth. Then move that stop back out of the way and move the left stop to cut the right side of the tenon. And the same process, etc. for front and back until you're left with a tenon. The mortises are easier with this method, as with this process you can set all 4 stops, left, right, front and back, all at the same time instead of one by one. You just set the stops using the markings on the piece as you've seen me do, but this time inside the pencil line, not outside. The end result is quite nice. Cutting the tenon seems involved for this method on film, but when you're doing it, setting the stops only takes a second or two. Machine tight like I did, you'll need to take the arris off the tenon to fit, but you know, it makes pretty easy work of mortise and tenons on large pieces or unusual shapes. So what started out as a small router sled really has become a multifunction piece of kit that I love using. And I really should mention here as well that a lot of this extra functionality was inspired by the Woodrow Lee Hyun channel. It's a woodworking channel, all in South Korean I think, but the multifunction machines they use there are really worth a look, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can go and check the channel out for yourselves. So hopefully this wasn't too long-winded and you found it interesting, and thanks for watching.